Happy New Year. I'm Dr. Berkson, and I'm so excited to be part of the Neurology Summit to help you protect your brain. It used to be that people were so frightened of the big C, which was cancer. Now, understandably, so many people are frightened of the big C, which is now cognitive decline. Every 30 seconds, somebody is being diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and allopathic medical interventions are telling us that there is nothing that we can do, so it's scary as heck. But I'm here to talk to you about 7 things that you can actually do to protect your brain. Yes, the human brain tissue is under assault in today's world. Maybe that's why we're having such a polemic time today, because people don't have their wits about them. And we all want to protect our 2 W's as we age, because we are living longer. We want to protect our wits and we want to protect our wallets, but you need to have your wits online to make your wallet stuffed so that you could take care of the rest of your life. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. One of the very first things to protect your brain is air quality. We don't really think about this that much. And when you go with a problem into the clinical trenches to see any kind of provider, they don't usually talk to you about air quality because that's not been addressed in medical school where they were trained. I was a hormone scholar at Tulane University in conjunction with the med school and Xavier University, and I got to work with all the top scientists that were taking a look at how our dirty planet is making us ill and our brains not working so well. I got invited to have that gig, which was an amazing experience in my life, and I've made friends ongoing, and I got to learn and work with the scientists that discovered estrogen receptor alpha and estrogen receptor beta and how all these affect the brain, because I'd written one of the very first books on endocrine disruption called Hormone Deception, how our toxic environment is gaining entry into our body and creating havoc, issues like cancer, but certainly issues like cognitive decline. We don't realize that air is so important. So we eat food several times a day, and people are starting to get the memo that food is really important and that your food choices are powerful. But we only consume food so many times a day. Well, some of us are addicted to consuming it all throughout the day, but it's a limited amount. Also, then there's water. Now, most of us don't realize that we inhale more water than we drink, and a lot of the water that we stand in under that lovely hot shower in the morning, there are different compounds like trihalomethanes that are aerosolized all throughout your house, and you inhale those, and those are pro-carcinogens and can be damaging to your brain. But again, that's limited. But did you realize that your dishwasher, your washing machine, and your shower are exposing you to more potential contaminants that are potentially brain damaging than the water that you drink? But the biggest issue of all, which is 24/7, every time you take an inhalation, is the air. Now, Harvard just came out with one of its second studies showing that any amount of air pollution can cause you to prematurely die. Any amount of air pollution, wherever you live, anywhere in the United States, whether it's rural United States, whether it's urban United States, especially if you live within a half hour of very busy roads, because the particulate matter in the air enters your home, enters your body, crosses the blood-brain barrier, and is really being linked to higher issues of cognitive decline. Now, there is one little oasis in the world where somebody is reversing mild and moderate cases of cognitive decline, which can include Alzheimer's, Lewy body disease, and other forms of cognitive decline that we really don't even have names for. This is at the University of UCLA in the Department of Neurology with Dale Bredesen, and he's been publishing his data for a number of years in the journal Aging. He's even been gracious enough to put his protocols online. If you just put in PubMed Dale Bredesen, you can come up with one of his articles and his protocol on dementia. He says, and that's been his focus, is working with protecting the brain, that there's 3 major causes of dementia. One of them is pollution, particulate matter, and heavy metals, and that's what we're talking about with air quality. And we're going to give you some hints about how you can really preserve your air quality. And number 2, he talks about mycotoxins being at least contributing to about 30% of cases of cognitive decline. These are the metabolites of mycelized candida or fungal infections. They could be stealth infections. You might not even know that you have them, but they can cross the blood-brain barrier and put the brain tissue on fire. The other cause that he talks about are hormone insufficiencies, because my latest book was called Sexy Brain, and that's because the brain is run by sex steroid hormones. And as our hormones wane, our dementia can increase. But if we maintain hormone health and hormone balance, and that's part of Bresidon's protocol is to do so, we can have better cognition. So every moment we are taking a breath, what is inside that air goes into our bloodstream, crosses the blood-brain barrier, and affects our brain. Now, the EPA did a series of elegant studies over a 10-year period that I published in Hormone Deception called the EPA Team Studies. And they put monitors on a representative population of Americans, a little bit over 3,000, like about 3,700 Americans, monitors that would be able to identify pollution and how much pollution that person was getting. The EPA wanted to know, where are Americans getting their pollution? Is it mostly in the air if you're standing outside as a beggar trying to get money to buy a morning latte? Where are we getting the pollution? Or is it in our home? So they had people wear these monitors for quite a long time, and then they did analytics on that data to show where we get most of the particulate matter or pollution that can be brain tissue threatening. What they discovered was good news and bad news. The good news is that Americans really get most of their pollution right in their home. The bad news is that Americans get most of their pollution right in their home. What's the good news about that, you say? Why did I even put that first? Because it means you can do something about it. In fact, the team study showed that the biggest pollution exposure that we had was in the bathroom in the morning because of that aerosolized water, because of personal care products that are robust with endocrine disrupting, potentially, compounds. The average adult uses about 9 to 10 products before they leave the bathroom in the morning. The average teenage girl uses almost up to 20 products. Many of these products brain assaulting. But the good news is you could do something about it. You can get green products. You could put a Berkey $50 water filter on your shower, and you can keep the fan going, and you could have filters. You could have the window open, ventilating, and really high quality air filters throughout your house, and using better and better products that you, for everything from cleaning. When I do my cleaning in the laundry room, I do not use any regular cleaners. I don't use those little teeny pieces of anti-static towels that are supposed to keep your clothes from sticking together. I use vinegar. I use green products. I keep a window open. If you don't have a window in your laundry room, the nearest window should be open. So you can open windows all throughout the house a few inches, and even if it's in the wintertime, that helps ventilate, and you can have quality air filters. Walter Crinion, who is the chair at the Southwest College of Naturopathic Medicine and really put environmental medicine on the map, and he's got a newsletter called the Crinion Opinion that gives you amazing new data about what's going on for your health, especially in relation to the environment. He recommends IQ Air. I also had on my radio show different people who talk to us about air. But air quality is huge, especially if you live within a half mile of a busy road. So you want to ventilate, you want to use filters on your water, ideally a whole house filter if you can. I helped design one of the very first whole house filters right during the time I was writing Hormone Deception, because I was horrified at the impact of air and water, and I thought it doesn't make any sense to just drink filtered water. Let's have all our water filtered. You can get a really quality whole house water filter for about $500 or $600. If you don't do that, you could put a filter on your shower. You could put a filter where the water goes into your washing machine, just like you do with your refrigerator. You can really have an IQ air filter either inserted on your own furnace or one on the lower part of your house if you have an upstairs, also in the upper part of your house. I have 2 floors, so I have an IQ air filter downstairs and an IQ air filter upstairs. Now, those are the air filters that are used by MD Anderson in their surgical theaters. They're used by NASA. They're really high quality filters, and so they're a little bit pricey. You can get it on Amazon Prime. You can get almost anything on Amazon Prime except, of course, your soulmate. Can't get that. But the best way that I've found for my patients is that these are pretty large and people are moving all the time and don't want to move with them. So if you go on Craigslist, you can often find these for $100 or $200 when their normal price is about $800 to $1,000, depending on which unit you're buying. The people at IQ are real helpful. You can call them up and ask them questions and tell them what their home is like. A lot of the people that help you with your environment are very helpful for you and will answer a lot of questions. But you can buy a used one because you're really buying new filters that you insert in them about once every 8-9 months or a year. The filters are the deal. So the body of the IQ Air, it doesn't matter if it's older, it's been used before, but just wash it well because it was in somebody else's house with somebody else's pollution. Particulate matter crosses the blood-brain barrier. That means that it also affects your gut because your gut and your brain are twins. When you're a fetus developing in your mother's tummy, a set of cells forms called the neurocrest, which go on to become a tube that's going to be your brain and your gut, called the neurotube. And then it splits in half, and half of these identical cells go up to your brain and half go to your gut. So as in the gut, as below, so above, as above, so below. Almost everything that's true for the brain is true for the gut, and there's tremendous crosstalk throughout your entire life. So protecting your air also protects your gut. Protects your gut, protects your brain. The other thing, I'm going to give you another hint. There's lots of other hints to protect your air, but we carry in a tremendous amount of pollution on the bottom of our shoes from outside. So I'm living in Great Hills, Austin, and a few blocks down the road, they're tearing down a whole bunch of buildings and putting up a high-rise condominium unit. That liberates lots of pollution in the air. When you walk around at Whole Foods or a restaurant, you're getting some of that pollution on the bottom of your shoes, so are your pets. And when you walk into your house, you carry that into your home, and your pet can carry some of that into your home, or your own pollution that you carried on the bottom of your shoes. And Cornell studies have then identified that within a few minutes, it's identified on your pillow upstairs and all throughout your house, because pollution just fills up and aerosolizes your home. So taking your shoes off at the front door, with pets, wiping their paws down if you can. I know with kitty cats it's kind of hard, but at least wiping them down several times a week so that they're not accumulating pollution. And also, the garage is a big deal. The garage that's attached when the car is parked, it's a huge machine that was very warm when you were driving in it, and it aerosolizes out lots of pollutant and particulate matter that comes underneath the door that divides your kitchen or your living room, whatever it is that the garage is next to you, if it's an attached garage. And again, those Cornell elegant studies have shown that outgassing car exhaust can be identified when a car is parked within a few minutes up in your master bedroom, even if it's upstairs. So what to do? If you just keep your garage door open for a few feet, if you're in an area that it's not safe to keep the whole garage door open, just for about 10 minutes allows the outgassing exhaust and the potential threat to your brain tissue to go out into the outside. So those are some tricks that are really helpful to protect your precious air. Precious air, it's such a big deal. The next thing is water. Walter Crinnion has this newsletter, as I was just saying, called the Crinnion Opinion, and he was recently talking about where do we get the residues of Roundup, which have now been shown to paralyze our microbiome because our own bugs can't metabolize Roundup, which is the most commonly used herbicide in the United States and a ripening agent for wheat. So where do we get it all? Okay, if you're eating organically, you think, I'm pretty cool. I eat organically. I'm like in a Seinfeldian bubble. But it turns out that when they've done extensive studies as to residues of glyphosate, I never know exactly how to pronounce that word. That's one of my malapropisms. They've discovered that there's quite a bit of it in water, even bottled water. So you need to have quality filters on your refrigerator. Don't get water in plastic. Don't go to the trouble of purchasing water. filter your own water. And they've discovered that it's even high in different foods like oats, like Cheerios is a really huge source of glyphosate, glyphosate. I can never pronounce this well. I have had Stephanie Seneff on my radio show. She's an MIT scientist with 3 higher board certifications from MIT, and I had trouble pronouncing it all through the whole show with her. It's kind of humbling and cute to have a little bit of a glitch, don't you think? So water is something important, and we usually think if we buy bottled water, that's enough. But reverse osmosis with adding minerals back in is the ideal way to get water. Many people drink too much water, and that rinses minerals out of your body. And minerals are so important because they bump heavy metals out of your body. The better your mineral reserve, the less you take on heavy metals that you even inhale or are exposed to. But we have somehow come to the idea that we need to hydrate, 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 when there's never been a lot of proof that we should really be drinking 8 glasses of water a day. And when I used to work in Tulsa with Dr. Jerry Block, double board certified with a PhD in nutrition, one of his big things in remineralizing bone density in older women, which we did very effectively in a few years, was to make sure, besides getting them to digest and getting them on the right mineral complexes, that they weren't drinking too much water. So you want to drink water, but you don't want to drink too much water. And you want the water that you drink not to have paralyzing pesticides in it. See, I sidestepped saying that word again. So that you can be safe. So water is important, but it's like everything else in the body. The body loves Goldilocks. Not too much, not too little, but just right. And the body likes that with minerals. The body likes that with hormones. The body likes that with nutrients. The other way to protect your brain, now we've just discussed air, we've just discussed water, is really get a handle on your love handles. There's been a lot of replicated, very elegant research to show that the more belly fat that you have, the less brain volume you have. And brain function depends mightily on volume, especially your hippocampus, which is a small little horse-shaped tissue in your brain that is really the physiologic analogy of your soul. Your hippocampus is where the 3 M&Ms live: your motivation, your memory, and your meanness, your me, M-E-N-E-S-S, your me, your sense of meanness. In fact, hippocampal shrinkage, which is a scientific term, is what happens right before you get cognitive decline, because much of your brain and your memory lives in your hippocampus. And your hippocampus functions best with 2 major things: hormones and volume. It likes to be big and robust, and it shrinks. And as it shrinks, we get more frail and get more dementia. At the Department of Psychiatry at the University of McGill University, they did a series of elegant studies in 2008 that won them very large amounts of money and made their reputation quite strong in the field of cognition and brain health and neurology, because they would measure with MRIs the volume of hippocampus in healthy people and then people who were becoming frail. And they were able to show that as the hippocampal volume shrinks, people have more problems recalling words. Railroad trains can drive through your sentences. You feel more fearful, less motivated. You really have a sense of more easily being overwhelmed. Those are all symptoms of your hippocampus starting to shrink. They would then do a series of standardized tests looking at the personality, the motivation of that person, really getting an overall template of how that person was functioning in that moment of time with a hippocampal volume that was slightly reduced. Then they gave estrogen injections to the females and testosterone injections to the males, and they tracked with MRIs, taking an exact look at the volume of the hippocampus, and they were able to show that they could revolume with hormones. They could fluff up the volume of the hippocampus, and that Then post-testing would show the motivation improved, the memory improved, the ability to speak without a train being able to drive through your sentences, even standing up straight, because that's where your three M&Ms are: your motivation, your memories, and your meanness. And as the hippocampus revolumized, the person, in essence, euthanized because their brain was improving. So hormones run your brain. That's very important for you to know, which is a really big there's a big emphasis on the importance of hormone balancing and maintaining hormone health even as you age. A lot of people say to me, if Mother Nature intended me to have hormones when I was older, she would have given me hormones when I'm older, so I'm not going to do it. But the issue is hormones have a lot to do with your brain health. In fact, Breslin, who is the one guy publishing data where he's reversing mild and moderate dementia cases, and I've now done it in a number of my patients, but it's not effective on the severe patients. Part of his protocol is to identify their hormone health and to replace the low hormones because hormones run the hippocampus. But when your belly fat gets large, and that's the visceral fat, not the fat underneath your skin, which is subcutaneous fat, but the fat underneath, way into your abdominal cavity, in between your organs, your inside belly fat. As that enlarges, this shrinks the hippocampus, shrinks the brain, and it competes with the ability of hormones to deliver their brain protective signals. So keeping yourself cardiovascularly fit and getting a sense on how much muscle mass to fat mass you have is really an important part of brain health. Now, when you get older, it's much harder to keep the weight off of your torso, but you can do it. I myself am not a spring chicken, but I have been working very diligently with the good vitamin D discipline and reducing body fat at a time in an era when most people are complaining that they can't get rid of that fat. But remember, the bigger your belly fat, your internal belly fat, the smaller your hippocampus, the smaller your gray matter where your higher executive functions live. The brain loves to be at a volume that's closer to youth. Hormones maintain that volume, exercise maintains that volume, a thinner torso maintains that volume, and also nutrients, but that's not a part of this talk today. Now, there is this crosstalk that I was just chatting about before, about how the brain and the gut started out in the developing fetus as twins. And it turns out that there's tremendous crosstalk all throughout your life between these two twins from birth. But it turns out that so we now know that the microbiota and the brain have tremendous crosstalk. But the microbiota is in crosstalk with the nooks and crannies where all the other microbial life lives. So it's not just the gut that keeps crosstalking with the brain, it's all of your biomes. So let me explain what biomes are. There was the Human Microbiome Project that was started by about 500 scientists by the NIH a number of years ago, and they wanted to look at every nook and cranny to see how all this microbial life that has more genetic material inside us than we do, how it affects our health. And they discovered that we have biomes all throughout our body. This microbial life is made up of bacteria, of fungi, and of viruses. In fact, we might even have many more viruses than we even have bacteria, and much of our research up to date has just been focusing on bacterial life. We're discovering that different diseases have different microbial footprints. For example, anorexia or inflammatory bowel disease or dementia. They have different commonalities and changes from a person who does not have those diseases. But the Microbiome Project found that there were teeming microbial life made up of all those three components: fungi, bacteria, and viruses, that could be good or bad. So that's the ratio of good to bad, that's the play of all life, of shadow and light. And that they weren't just in our gut, that we have biomes or microbial life in our nasal cavities, in our mouth, in our esophagus, in our gastric fundi, which is our stomach, in the small intestine, the large intestine. Cleveland Clinic has just shown we have biomes in our breast. We probably have biomes in our prostate. We know we have biomes in our lungs. All of these nooks and crannies host microbial life that affect us and especially affect our brain. So the doctor of the future will do a comprehensive stool study to see what you got growing in you. But what we're now doing, I was just speaking at A4M at the gut conference, and the gastroenterologists there were sharing that they do nasal swabs to see what's growing in there. They do oral swabs to see what's growing in your oral cavity. All of these biomes, even your vaginal biome and your urethral tubes, your ureters, they all communicate with each other. And all of these biomes affect brain health. So the doctor of the future, and part of Dale Bresidon's protocol, is to really assess the mothership of your health, your biomes, which we used to think was mainly our gut, but we now know it's a bigger picture because your gut is always in constant communication and chatter with all of these other biomes. So for example, somebody with chronic upper respiratory disease might really be having an adversely altered lung biome that might be coming from a nasal biome. There might be pathogens in the nose. So there's all this crosstalk, and they all affect brain health. So the doctor of the future is going to assess your biomes. How do you like with that? And that's one of the ways that you can start having better health. And what drives your biomes more than anything is food, your food choices, which is not part of the topic of this talk, but food positively, if they're good foods, drives your biomes in a healthier way than anything else. Hormones drive your biomes, and there's the unappreciated role of your gut and your biomes with hormones. That's part of my career, and hormones have a lot to do with that. That's why our biomes can go more south as our hormones go more south and wane as we get older, unless you do something safely about it. And the other thing is the act of intimacy. So this is quite extraordinary, but in my new book, Sexy Brain, I discuss how the big O can protect you against the big A, Alzheimer's. And why would that be? Okay, why would that be? So I was invited to write or contribute to a book. I was invited by a surgeon and a group of urologists who were opening up 100 erectile dysfunction clinics to contribute to a book on hormones. So we cut a deal, and they were going to use this book, in which they've been doing, in their waiting room. And I started to do due diligence on erectile dysfunction and sex and hormones. And to my absolute amazement, I discovered all this data about how regular intimacy protects the brain. Studies are coming out, for example, from England, where they showed the people who continued to have sex, couples who had sex and enjoyed it and liked each other several times a week, had significantly lower levels of dementia and cognitive decline than people who said, I'm so relieved to be done with it. I'm done with it, which usually is a sign that your hormones aren't working, and your hormones have a lot to do with your brain health. But in particular, your love hormone, which is oxytocin. That's released when you have orgasm, and women make more, so women bond more. No matter how a guy says, don't be so bonded to me, the more you give her an orgasm, the more she will be bonded to you. But most people don't realize that we all make oxytocin every 2 or 3 minutes throughout our whole life, and it has a lot to do, and we make it in our central nervous system and in our brain. And it has a lot to do with the health of our gut and our biomes. We've now discovered from research out of Sweden, where they took little bits of intestinal tract from all over the body, and they looked for oxytocin receptors. And hormones are a set of proteins that deliver a message to another set of proteins in the shape of a satellite dish called a receptor. So hormones deliver a message to a receptor. And there are oxytocin receptors all throughout your esophagus, your stomach, your small intestine, your large intestine, your sigmoid colon, which is the bottom part of your colon before the most southerly end, and even your liver, and your pancreas. So many of your digestive players and even a lot of your biome tissues, now that you've learned there's many biomes cross-talking with your gut biomes, have receptors for oxytocin. And it turns out that nature wants you to have connection. Now, the connection could be up in the boudoir with orgasms, or the connection could be hanging out at Starbucks with your besties, or it could be hanging with your kids. Every time you have authentic human connection, you release more oxytocin, which euthanizes and caretakes your biomes and your brain. So I realized that nature never does anything without a reason. And nature wants us to be smart and have good brains so that we'll caretake the family in the next generation, because nature is all about the next generation and never does anything without a reason. So nature wants us to have oxytocin, the love binding hormone, because it caretakes the brain and all of the biomes in the gut. Nature wants us to have community. Nature wants us to have authentic connection. And today's world, where our young kids are being trained to have more focus on a screen and not be told by an adult, you should look in somebody's eyes and connect with them and say, "Hi, how are you, Dr. Berkson? How are you doing today?" They are losing out on connecting molecules and hormones that are released, but only released with authentic connection. So intimacy and human connection have a lot to do with protecting the brain. I don't know what it is. I had on my show, my radio show, a gentleman who had just written a book called Kid Alert: Is Your Kid in Need of an Entitlement Intervention? And for some reason, the kids in a lot of American households today are put above everybody else. And that doesn't really seem to work, as we're seeing more and more problems and more ill children emotionally in body, mind, and spirit. And I noticed that when you're talking to an adult, their kid might come along, and in the olden days, the child would have to stand there or say, "Excuse me, mom," or say, "Excuse me," to the person the mother was talking to. And then the mom or dad might say, "Can you wait a minute? I'm talking to Dr. Berkson." Or, "Excuse me, Dr. Berkson, I'm going to talk for a second to my child." Instead, all the focus goes on the kid. You forget the adult that's standing there. And the message that's given to the child is that adults aren't supposed to be so revered, or human connection, real connection. Look Dr. Berkson in the eye and say hello. Wait a second. These little cues make a difference and reverberate over time with brain health, because authentic human connection releases these hormones that then are brain protective. Now, the one other thing is, we have an ill planet. And our ill planet is filled with hormone altering chemicals. They're in pesticides. They're in plastics. Your computer has lots of plastic parts, and you sit in front of your computer. Those plastics are aerosolized like a peanut cartoon thing all around your head. They're invisible, but they compete with your own hormones. And you've just learned that hormones caretake your brain. So a big part of keeping your brain safe is trying to reduce your exposure to hormone altering chemicals. Now, on January 31st of 2017, Huffington Post and Harvard got together and initiated a series of public forums. And they said, for many years, the two major threats to humanity have been nuclear war and global warming. But now we're adding to that hormone altering chemicals, because they threaten our brain. They threaten pregnancies, they threaten birth, they threaten many things, because our hormones are our internet system physiologically inside our body. Many of the people on that forum were scientists that I had worked with at Tulane. And so it's really important to reduce your exposure. So we're learning to eat better, put better stuff into us, but we want to try and get the bad stuff out of us. So as much as you can, purchase green, have water filters, air filters, good ways of washing your veggies, which just putting a little bit of salt and baking soda in a tub of water and letting your veggies soak in there for 10 minutes is a great way to get all residues of pesticides, because even organic foods can have some residues of pesticides. And all of those are brain threatening. Now, I know this seems like a lot to do. I'm going to summarize what we've talked about, but it all adds up, and we're going to live longer. Do you want to be in a wheelchair with all white hair, with your head back, completely out of it with dementia as I lived with my mom in the lockdown dementia unit when she developed dementia, but not until she was really in her mid-90s. In fact, I wrote a book on it called My Mother Who Wore Her Purse as a Shoe, because that was the defining moment when my mother put a little cheap black patent leather purse on her foot as a shoe and walked around in a circle, and my mother was gone. Do you want to age but be gone? We have it within our control to protect our brain. The American brain, the universal brain, because the whole planet is ill, is under attack. But I'm going to summarize for you the steps that you've now learned how you could protect your brain. You can put some emphasis on your air quality with the products that you use, with filters on your water, with filters in your home, with ventilating, and how you deal with your garage and your shoes at the front door. You could put emphasis on water. You should have really quality water and water filters and not be drinking out of plastic bottles. You want to keep your torso body fat down because the bigger your belly, the smaller your brain volume, especially your hippocampus. You want to consume really great food because food drives a healthier biome, and all of your biomes crosstalk and affect your brain. You want to work with some practitioner to rule out any fungal infections because fungal metabolites called mycotoxins or even mycotoxins from mold can cross your blood-brain barrier and threaten your brain. You want to make sure that you have intimacy, even if you're solo, hang with friends, have some kind of community, because nature intended you to connect. And out of true connection, you release hormones and chemicals that are brain and humanity protecting. You want to reduce as much as you can without going crazy because you can't live in a Seinfeldian bubble like the bubble boy. You want to try and just live a cleaner life. Take one step at a time to do that. The brain is an amazing thing, and it's a terrible thing to lose. But we see that you could reverse brain damage through the work of Bresson at UCLA at the Department of Neurology. We see at the Department of Psychiatry at McGill University, they can fluff up and revolumize the hippocampus. There is a God. What you do makes a difference. You can reverse damage if it doesn't go too far. And I hope I've contributed to your brain power. May the force of your brain be with you, and have a great and happy, healthy 2018. I'm Dr. Lindsay Berkson, and today is the last day of 2017, and I've been spending it with you. Bye.